Hi everyone, welcome. I'm out here in my garden and I have in front of me my outdoor worm bin, and it was exactly 2 weeks and 2 days ago that I harvested the material out of this bin, and I actually relocated the worms, but I do know that a certain number of worms remained with all those larger bits of material that I screened out of the finished compost. And I put all that unbroken down material back into this bin, and along with those few worms that managed to slip by the screening process, I launched off this new worm bin. But I know for a fact that it couldn't have been more than just a couple hundred worms, because I did do a pretty thorough job screening the worms and the compost from one another. So even though this is a new bin and it's been in action now for a couple weeks, I still feel like it just has a far smaller worm population that it could have. And another thing that I've got going on out here in my yard is my outdoor composting bin. Not my outdoor worm bin, but my outdoor composting bin. Which, on its own, without me putting any worms into it, is pretty heavily populated with red wiggler worms. And those are all just worms that voluntarily came out of the earth and made their way into that container. Along with a whole bunch of other creatures that have made themselves at home in that outdoor composting bin of mine. But my idea today was to put on a glove and to go picking through that bin in an attempt to try to extract a few handfuls of worms, maybe a pound or so of worms, just so I can get the population in here a little bit bigger, so that I can feel like this is also a place where I can compost things and expect that they'll actually get broken down because there's a large enough population in here. So my aim today is to go visit my outdoor composting bin, try to find worms, extract them, and release them down into this container here. So let's see how we do with that. Alright, let's get started. So this bin always has a wide variety of different types of creatures occupying it. Oops, I don't know what that was, but I guess one of the stars of the show is this little guy here. And I mean, I pretty much bumped into this guy before when I was rolling this container closer to the table over here where I'm working, and it's the this is the adult black soldier fly, which has grown up in this bin and is now just looking for a mate. And if you work your way around here, and if you look closely down here among the corn husks, you can see another black soldier fly emerging from down below. The black soldier fly larvae are really what do the hard work. These things, once they're adult soldier flies, they don't eat anymore. All they do is they mate and lay eggs, and then they pretty much drop dead. So these little guys, once they emerge from being a larvae, they crawl out, they get activated by the daylight, go looking for a mate, and then once they've mated and laid their eggs, that's it. They don't even have the means to eat. So once we get into this bin, we're going to see a whole lot more activity from the black soldier flies, except they're not going to be the flies themselves. They're going to be the baby versions of these things in their larvae form. The little beetle that I knocked off the wall before is right here in my thumb now. I scooped him up. I guess he's just looking to get out of the bin, maybe. I don't know. Whatever. Let them do their own thing. I bet you when we get done, these black soldier flies that are just hanging out here in the bin, they're probably going to be right where we left them when we finish. You know, but I don't think so. That's not true, because I'm going to have to disturb things quite a bit over here to dig down to where I believe I'm going to find some worms. So I think at least this black soldier fly is probably going to have to take off. Fly free. See, they're so docile, they don't care. Maybe I should put it over here on the other side, alongside the other black soldier fly. I did watch a video the other day that described the difference between the male and the female, but I didn't really take the time to try to distinguish one from the other. And I put a lot of stuff in here recently. Not only did I pile a whole bunch of corn husks into here. I also piled a whole bunch of garden cuttings in here, stuff that just didn't really succeed. So I got some cucumbers down here, some tomatoes that I think I just left on the vine a bit too long. But my outdoor bin is pretty much where all the kitchen scraps, all the garden waste ends up. And I think what we're seeing down here now are some other little creatures taking advantage of the bounty of food in here. A whole bunch of crickets cruising around. Now, since the black soldier fly larvae tend to create a real heat around themselves, a real core of very warm temperatures, I try to place all the fresh food down the middle so that that's where they're going to end up going and really warming up things down the middle. And then that hopefully leaves a cooler space out around the edges for the worms to retreat to, since they don't like it as warm as the black soldier flies like it. Because the black soldier flies definitely like it when it's nice and warm. That's when they really kick into high gear. So you can already see some of this material on the very edges is already crawling with worms. So let's see if we can get a handful that we would consider to be a nice jumble of worms. And it makes me even wonder if these are in fact red wigglers, because they're so dark in color. Makes me wonder if they might be night crawlers. I'm going to just go ahead and extract them with whatever material they're occupying. And if I can, maybe I'll just pick out some of these slower composting bits, like the, I don't know, maybe it doesn't make any sense to bother with it. There's a whole bunch of peanut shells in here. I figured I'd try to pull out of here because it just seems like the sort of thing that might take worms forever to consume. But it looks to me like we got ourselves a pretty good couple dozen at least worms in that handful. So I just figured I would kind of work my way around here gradually and see if we can extract another handful of stuff. Let's see what we end up with here. And here too, it looks like a pretty good number of worms hanging out here. So we'll take them too. I got a feeling that the material that we put into this bin is going to be a lot of pretty tough stuff. Some tougher materials that might take a little bit extra time to break down, but I'm certainly in no rush. Sounds like the kids next door are having some fun playing in their pool. And they definitely should take advantage of the weather today, because there's rain coming tomorrow. And that was the reason I wanted to see if I could do this today, because I knew that tomorrow would probably not be an option for me to try this. But I've been really wanting to try to get this outdoor worm bin of mine repopulated with a good, healthy worm population again. And when I launched off the bin last year, I had done so with worms that I took out of my wormery. But every time I've checked in on this container here, I've always gotten the impression that there were just tons and tons of worms in here that could be used for kicking off a new bin. So that's why I ended up deciding to try this for a little change of pace. I've never really tried harvesting worms from the wild, and I believe that that's kind of what we're really doing here. And it does seem like we're getting quite a number of them in here now. Just that their dark colors makes me question whether they're red wigglers or could they be something else. I'm not sure. It's so funny, all these other creatures hanging around here. Crickets and roly-polies, woodlice, and black soldier fly larvae. Got a whole wide variety of different composting creatures in this bin. That's why I'm always really intrigued by picking through it, because there's always going to be an interesting sight to see in here. Well, I think I'm getting pretty close to filling up my little tub here, so I think I've got one more spot over here that I've not yet dug into. So we'll see what we can get from this one last section over here. Let's see what we ended up with here. Well, definitely looks like another good big handful of worms. But I think we're almost at our limit here in terms of space within this container. Not sure if I can maybe fit one more in. So a lot of you might be questioning, what's the deal here? You're going to just launch off a new worm bin together with, you know, a whole bunch of other creatures? What's going to differentiate it from just an outdoor composting bin? What's going to make it into a worm bin? Well, I think with the black soldier flies, they've only got a few more weeks, maybe a couple months tops left before the temperatures drop way too low for them. And I believe just on their own accord, they're just going to end up eliminating themselves from this container, just based on the fact that they're not kind of a year-round creature. I don't know where they go in the winter. Maybe their larvae kind of go into some sort of a suspended state over the winter and just sort of come back to life, or whatever the case may be. But I think in time I will end up having far fewer black soldier flies in my outdoor worm bin, and then hopefully we'll just end up with mainly worms and maybe some other helper creatures in there. So you can see I've got this container all full, and it's certainly heavy, and I know it's not all worms, but it's got to be at least a few hundred. I'd love to hear everyone's thoughts on how many you think are in here, just based on what we saw here together. So let's introduce these guys to their new home. So now this is what the inside of my outdoor worm bin looks like, if you've not seen it yet. It's got its contents covered with a plastic bag to help keep moisture in, a couple cardboard coverings, and a piece of plywood, in the hopes that this is enough of a deterrent to keep any sort of rummaging neighborhood creatures from picking down into it and making a meal out of the worms themselves. Now, even though I've had, you know, this bin in action for only 2 weeks and 2 days, I have actually fed it. So I've taken some of my clippings from my garden. Here you can see I clipped off a bunch of leafy matter off of my cucumber plants. And by being right under the plastic, it's been in a spot where it can continue to get really soaked from all the recirculating moisture right beneath the plastic. And my hope was that it just sort of ends up becoming a material that the worms would enjoy. But like I said, there's really not many worms in here. I mean, if we poke around on here a little bit, I'm sure we'll eventually see a couple. I mean, I've spotted a couple already, but not many at all. There's a couple down there at the bottom. You could see them squirming around. So, you know, I'm not sure if my estimate of a couple hundred is on the money or not. It might not be. It might be a little bit shy of the actual number. Maybe there's more. It's hard to say. But you can also see that the bin is not very deep. You know, there's maybe only a couple inches worth of material in here. Because this was really only populated with the material that did not screen out when I harvested the castings from here. This is a little novelty item that's been kind of going along with the contents of this outdoor worm bin. It's a cork. I'm not even sure how I ended up getting it in here, but it's in here now, and it's sort of a test item, I guess, to see how long it takes for a cork to break down. Here's the stem of a pumpkin. A couple novelty items that have been kind of with this bin for a while now, so out of tradition, I guess, we've just been sticking to keeping them in there. So let's see if we can set this thing up so we can release our extra worms that we're going to use to try to boost up the population in this container. I'm thinking push the more finished materials out to the outer edges. Kind of leave this partially broken down stuff right here for them to be able to cruise right down into and take advantage of. The cork has slipped out of my fingers. I don't even know where it ended up at this point, and I'm not even that interested. It'll always surface in future check-ins. So whatever, I've actually placed the the stem of the pumpkin here in the middle, at least, even though the cork is now missing in action. Now, one thing I'm not really sure of is how much grit there is, so I took my little bag that's full of pulverized eggshells here. You can see some dust rising, and most of the time you'll hear people warn you about the eggshell dust, because it is very coarse and it could mess with your lungs. So it's stuff that you don't want to breathe in. So I figured I'd turn my head away and keep my mouth shut for a second there while I dump in this fairly generous portion of crushed eggshell. And this is stuff that's going to help the worms eat their food, whatever food they might get. But for now, I think we've got plenty of food in here. We're just going to dump in the extra worms and set them free in their new home. Here we go. I don't think I see any in the plastic container here. And maybe as we break this wad apart, we'll be able to get a better view of how many worms we just injected into this container. There's a few in here. Not bad, right? Let's give them a minute to get situated in their new home. Well, here we've got another black soldier fly. It was actually hanging out on my leg, so I figured I would put it someplace where it's got a better chance of finding a mate. So I'm going to go ahead and put it over by my outdoor composting bin. But before I do, and before I take the time to put things out here away and to clean up, I just figured I'd say thank you. I'm going to call this the end of my video here, because putting things away and cleaning things up is not interesting. But before I go, let me just say thank you. Thanks so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, definitely please remember to give me a thumbs up. And if you did enjoy the video, you might also consider subscribing to the channel as well. That's always really appreciated too. Alright, let me go get this little guy into a new home and get things out here cleaned up. Alright everyone, thanks so much for watching. Have a great day. Bye now.